Well, we're joined now by Ivan Garcia-Hidalgo in Washington, D.C. He is a Republican strategist and the president of the Hispanic Leadership Council. And Harry Litman is in La Jolla, California. He's a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Harry, I know you were expecting to debate Professor Alan Dershowitz. He pulled out at the last minute. I assure you, Ivan's still a suitable opponent, no doubt. Let me ask you from the outset, Harry, after reading all 400-plus pages of the Mueller report, do you believe that the Attorney General mischaracterized it when he told us what it was about a couple weeks ago?
There's certainly a lot of things that were left out, but I feel that's just about beside the point now. We now do have these 438 pages. They are as scathing an indictment of presidential power as probably the country has ever seen. They have a solid half displaying a political campaign eager to exploit the efforts by a foreign hostile power to subvert the election. They have a president who clearly, Mueller concludes, abused the trust and tried to subvert a criminal investigation for his own purposes to avoid embarrassment and criminal liability. Really, it goes well beyond anything that happened in Watergate. So it just sets up this very critical political, but large P political moment for Congress.
Okay, but Harry, if there's a lack of clear coordination, collusion, obstruction, it means you're innocent, right? If you're not going to jail for anything, it means you're cleared, you're innocent. The president is cleared, right, Harry?
The president is not going to jail, but the president never could go to jail. That's what Bob Mueller said. So therefore, it was a judgment for Congress, and especially on the obstruction side, I think Mueller, there's no other way to read it than Mueller concluded he was over the line and repeatedly, but he sees it as the framers saw it, as a question of abuse of trust, a question of sober political judgment about whether the conduct is tolerable for us in a democracy. That's a really grave question that transcends small-term political calculations.
Ivan, do you believe the president was exonerated?
Well, a couple of things. Harry, good morning. Harry knows what the function of the special prosecutor is, right? It's either to bring charges or to not bring charges. What the prosecutor, what the Mueller report is pretty much a political document made up, brought together by 13 Democrats and Mueller, who's an anti-Trump Republican, so they can use it with the media and the Democrats in the House and create more political chaos for the 2020 election. But if you look at the document clearly states, I think it's in page 2, there was no criminal conspiracy, end of story, it's done. If there is no criminal conspiracy, then there is no obstruction of justice. That's just plain common sense. Everything else is just mumbo jumbo. What we really should be looking at is what everybody already knows. The Russians did try and interfere in the elections. It happened during Obama and Clapper and Comey and Brennan's tenure. What did they do? They did absolutely nothing. They created they went after it and spied on the Trump campaign for political gain and ignored the Russian attack on the United States. That's really what's at stake right now.
Okay,
right?
Let me ask you something. So you say a lot of this is mumbo jumbo, right? I'm looking at some of the details, especially testimony from Don McGahn, the lawyer, right? So after Trump fires Comey and Mueller's appointed special counsel, there's all these fights between the president and his lawyer to the extent that eventually the lawyer says, I can't take this anymore and I'm leaving. June 17th, this is in the report, Trump's at Camp David. He calls McGahn at home and orders him to have Mueller fired. Now, this might not prove obstruction as such, but are you telling me this is all mumbo jumbo and as a Trump supporter, it doesn't worry you in the slightest? Clearly, he was trying to obstruct the process by getting the guy fired, right?
I think he was, well, here's reality. Donald Trump is not a politician, or he wasn't. He was a businessman, a construction person from New York, from Manhattan. He's not somebody that's used to the political process and how politics works in Washington. And like in anything in the private sector, something doesn't work, something isn't working, you fire that person. That's how reality in life works. Politics in Washington is a little bit different, but he did not exceed, there was no abuse of power there because he was within his constitutional right to fire the attorney general, fire Comey, fire the special prosecutor. They work at the will of the president.
Fire the guy who's looking into him.
Fire
the guy who's looking into him. That's Saddam Hussein levels, isn't it?
Well, actually, no, because Comey told him 3 times that he was not the target of the investigation. He felt and knew that he had not done any criminal conspiracy or collusion with the Russians. He knew it was a witch hunt, so he thought it was all bogus, and he wanted to be done with it. That's the reality of
Come in, Harry.
Felt, right?
Yeah, I heard the thrust of what Ivan said, not all the details, but of course to think of this as mumbo jumbo and politics as usual is really a grave, even historic mistake. The conduct is exactly what happened in Watergate with the Saturday Night Massacre. This wouldn't be a casual firing like of another officer. This is the person who Trump now knows at this very point is investigating him. That's the soul of obstruction of justice. And it's just a question for everyone to answer. Is that tolerable in our chief executive? We certainly knew it wasn't for Nixon. It may be that there's arguments to be made. It's important that they be made, though. I do think to date, in the political calculus of Senate Republicans seems to be, let's close our ears and pretend this hasn't happened. And that is a really abject
But Harry, the Democrats
this
as well.
Obviously,
I mean, okay, Harry,
a serious document.
Yes,
what about House Majority Leader
Yes, and the
Steny
Democrats
Hoyer?
as well.
Okay, the Democrats are saying, based on what we have seen to date, going forward on impeachment is not worthwhile at this point. Whether for tactical reasons, whether it's because there's an election coming up and they feel they can beat him then, they're saying it's not the whopper that everybody else is saying, and these are the Democrats. This should be manna from heaven for the Democrats if there were these smoking guns in there, right, Harry?
Well, so I don't know about manna from heaven, but I agree with you that it's certainly not nearly as monolithic as for the Republicans, but you have important aspects of the Democratic leadership who are saying we shouldn't go forward, and they're saying it because of their short-term political calculus, not wanting to look like the Republicans of 1998. It's a grave mistake on their part, too. Their responsibilities now are just broader, more important, more historic than simple short-term political gain. Every member of Congress owes it to the American people to be participating in a judgment about whether this conduct is tolerable in the United States.
Let's have a listen to Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York and former Republican presidential candidate. Have a little listen.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with taking information from Russians.
There's nothing wrong with taking information.
Depends on where it came from. It depends on where it came from.
Ivan, Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. You said earlier it's clear that the Russians were meddling and fiddling and trying stuff even from before Trump, right? Do you agree with Rudy Giuliani? Nothing wrong with taking information from the Russians?
Well, you got to listen to the entire conversation, right, and not just a quote out of context, right? So what he's referencing to, and if you look at the Mueller report, is there was contact, there was information, and we're talking about WikiLeaks. Right, we didn't know. Nobody knew that the WikiLeaks dump came from Russians. There were rumors about an operative within the DNC releasing information from the DNC. Nobody knew who hacked Podesta's emails. So how do you know? I mean, when you get access to information, it's your First Amendment right? So that's why there was no criminal collusion. That's exactly why. That's why when you look at the situation with Chelsea Manning, and Assange. That's why Assange is being charged, because he conspired and worked with Manning to break and hack into DoD servers. The Trump administration did no such thing. Right. Sure, WikiLeaks, Assange, Gustafer 2.0 maybe reached out to Roger Stone or somebody else within and around the campaign and said, "Hey, I got these files." Said, "Sure, let me take a look at
Ivan,
them."
when the president,
you don't know what it is.
Yeah, when the president during the campaign was publicly urging WikiLeaks to release dirt on Clinton, saying, "I love WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks, do your thing," release the emails and so on. And now after Julian Assange was arrested and might be extradited, he said, "Oh, I know nothing about WikiLeaks. I have nothing to do with WikiLeaks." When he says that, doesn't he look a little guilty? Doesn't he seem a little guilty?
Well, that comment was specifically about the arrest. When he said, "Hey," they asked the president about the arrest on Assange and WikiLeaks, and he goes, I don't know anything about it. I don't. He didn't know about the arrest. He's the president of the United States. He was going through other things. If they ask him who he knows what WikiLeaks, of course he knows what WikiLeaks is. And I think everybody knows. And everybody was waiting for the dumps. You guys in the media, CNN, everybody was waiting. Every morning when the dump came out, everybody scours through every single page of emails and found information to go comment on.
Okay.
I mean, that's just reality.
Okay.
The reality of the business, right? It doesn't mean that CNN should go to jail, right? It doesn't mean anybody else that looked at those documents should go to jail. I mean, that's just reality.
Harry?
And, I retweeted them, everybody else did.
I want to ask Harry about looking forward now. For those who still have faith in the facts that came out of the Mueller investigation, and they feel there's enough in there to punish the president in some way, shape, or form, what should their next step be?
Okay, well, first, maybe they don't think they should punish. Look, there's a basic error that Ivan makes to equate criminal conduct with impeachable conduct. They're very, they are different. On WikiLeaks, it illustrates two things. One, the zeal. If a foreign hostile power approaches you with information, you go to the FBI. That's what John McCain would do, George W. Bush would do, anyone would do. And it also illustrates, of course, that the president has continually lied to the American. And so it's even harder than normal when you interrupt because I can't understand you. It illustrates that he's been lying daily to the American people, and that's a grave matter as well. What should they do? They should insist on investigating fully in order to make a sober determination whether or not the only punishment they have, unfortunately, really, of impeachment, the grave one that they know even won't, in some ways it's quixotic, given the Senate Republicans, whether they nevertheless conclude that you simply can't let this pass. It's a huge moment like the civil rights era where the Congress has to stand up. I don't know if they're there yet, but they're certainly at a point where they have to look into it. That's what they would do.
Harry Litman and Ivan Garcia-Hidalgo.
Debate it.
Okay.
Let the people participate.
Okay, yeah, I mean, look,
Thank you.
It would be interesting if it was unredacted as well, because I think there's some spicy stuff in there that we'd all like to see. But listen, I've got to move on. Harry and Ivan, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.